The talk you are about to hear is by Roshi Amala Wrightson, teacher at the Auckland Zen Centre.
Today is the 20th of August, 2024, and this is the third and last in a series of talks on the four nutriments, what we take into ourselves or assimilate, and the ways in which these things can either nourish us or make us sick. And we've already looked at volition, what we want, sense impressions. These are what we take in through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And last one, the two that we're going to look at today, consciousness, and then literally what we eat and drink, our food and drink. So we'll take this up in our text. This is Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a compilation plus with commentaries from some of his students. And the section we're going to be reading from is called Collective Consciousness is Food. So there is the nutriment of volition and the nutriment of sense impressions. And the third kind of nutriment the Buddha spoke about is consciousness. We can speak of individual consciousness and collective consciousness. The individual is made of the collective, and the collective is made of the individual. They inter-are. Our individual consciousness reflects the collective. For example, the fear and anger in us are individual, but they also reflect somehow the fear and anger of society. Or suppose you think of something beautiful. It's not just because it is beautiful in itself, but because it's considered so by the collective unconscious, the collective consciousness. The individual consciousness and the collective consciousness that we consume every day are very real. This is not hard to understand, this interplay between our individual consciousness and the collective consciousness in which we live is in a kind of atmosphere, so we absorb all kinds of things from that. But we can also contribute to the collective consciousness. It's in all kinds of different ways, positive and negative. I would say that great artists in many ways contribute to the collective consciousness. They give us more ways of seeing and hearing, and tasting and touching and smelling. And then we also have individuals who sabotage our collective consciousness, that muddy it. I think of that book by Ayn Rand, I forget the name of it, that has been so destructive for more than a generation. Untruths which become very influential. But most of the time we experience our consciousness as being something personal, even if it's not so. I've given an example of this, that somebody who's awakened to some degree or another isn't immune from being caught up in these collective notions. Roshi Kepler told the story of being out somewhere one time with Harada Roshi, his first main teacher, and they saw this GI, this American soldier, and he was dressed in a suit, and he had a bright red tie on, and in Japanese culture, red is considered to be only for women to wear, and apparently Harada Roshi was really incredulous that any big masculine guy would wear a red tie. There's just one example of how we can be conditioned to see a colour, for instance, in a certain way. Continue. Thoughts, feelings, and states of mind can all be considered a kind of food entering our body and mind. If we sit there and allow suffering or sadness to come up, and we chew over it again and again, like ruminant animals chewing the cud, consciousness can become an unwholesome kind of food. But with the energy of mindfulness, we can train to handle our thinking with appropriate attention in a way that leads to understanding, compassion, and freedom. He's talking here about mindfulness. We can also apply the same thing to our zazen. If we're regularly doing zazen, we're likely to become aware of our states of mind more immediately and be able to nip them in the bud if they are very corrosive and negative. To handle our thinking with appropriate attention. It's a good way of putting it because it's not always so clear how to proceed. But if we understand that the most important thing is awareness, and then catching ourselves, or maybe if we're not at that stage of being able to look back on a situation and recognize where there's been unwholesome thinking or feeling, and then maybe after many times of being able to notice something after it happens, then we can catch it when it's actually happening. And then further along still, it may be that particular negative impulse, thought, image, belief ceases to arise. We can choose when it's appropriate to bring our attention to different kinds of thoughts. Our consciousness is a source of food, and with mindfulness we can choose which food we know will nourish us and help us grow. But this understanding goes beyond merely working with ourselves. He says, if we see a friend who is sunk in thought and carried away by their thinking, and whose face looks anxious and sad, we know they may be drowning in their thinking or in a feeling of pain and sorrow. This is inappropriate intention. In such moments, we have to help. We put a hand on our friend's shoulder and say, penny for your thoughts. It's a beautiful day. Let's go for a walk. Well, we might not say penny for your thoughts. Might be something less Victorian. But we can help somebody to manage their mind states by suggesting something like this: go for a walk, have a coffee. We help pull our friend out of consuming unwholesome consciousness food. We don't let them sit there ruminating. Anyone who can benefit from a zone of positive collective energy with good friends will start to feel better, and day by day they'll feel nourished and transformed. This is one of the benefits that can be from having friends, Dharma friends, who have some awareness of these things themselves, and so it can really help us navigate through these negative states of mind. The same is also true with negative energy in the collective consciousness. When fear and anger become collective, it can be extremely dangerous. And we've seen this lately with the way that social media can whip up an angry crowd, and it can be not just local area but spread across a whole country, like we've seen in Britain recently. All based on false information as well. That is why it is very important to choose an environment where you'll be influenced by a healthy, clear, collective consciousness. Many of us are influenced by thinking around us. For example, during the Iraq War in 2004, 80% of Americans believed the war was just, whereas in the UK, only 35% thought so. A whole country can lock itself into one notion, one idea, one feeling. The mass media, the military-industrial complex, all those elements may create a prison for us, so we continue to think in the same way, to see in the same way, and to act in the same way. I was reflecting on this afternoon when I was preparing the talk, and remembering how when I was at school in about I think the 5th form or 6th form, we had an English teacher who specifically attempted or succeeded to some degree in arming us to be able to be immune to advertising. We did a whole series of exercises based on becoming critical of advertising material and seeing how it worked, analysing how it worked on us. And sometimes the questions arise about whether kids should do anything but STEM subjects, but a critical mind, the ability to not be taken in by advertising, and now for instance by social media, is a really important thing for all of us to learn. It's really, without it, democracy can start to decay, which we've seen some of. So, and part of this awareness involves being self-aware about how our mind is pulled one way or another. He goes on. Who can help us get out of that prison of views, of feelings, the prison of collective consciousness? You. Whether you are an artist, a writer, a journalist, a filmmaker, an activist, or a practitioner, you should generate your own insights. You help the Buddha in you to manifest, and you express yourself in the light of truth. And even if the majority has not seen the truth that you have, you are courageous enough to continue, the minority who have the truth with them can transform the whole situation. So he mentions these different people who are like leaders of opinion. In this process, we can go beyond just the manifestations of the collective consciousness or our own individual consciousness, and appreciate consciousness in its own, for its own sake. Just to realize, which we will do at some point in our practice, that it's impossible to experience anything separately from consciousness. There's no such thing as an observer separate from the thing observed. This is quite an astounding and far-reaching understanding. It's not to say that there's no objective reality. You could say the moon that has risen tonight is simultaneously and objectively real and existing in an infinite number of states, depending on how many consciousnesses happen to be regarding it at any given moment. So it's profoundly multivalent, you could say. It doesn't have just one value or one meaning. Think of the line in the Affirming Faith and Mind. When you assert that things are real, you miss their true reality. But to assert that things are void also misses reality. Each thing is a mystery. Each person, each being. I'm going to share with you some words on consciousness by Swimme, which can perhaps help us to appreciate being alive and aware. Because that is also part of our practice, is to take us beyond the just immediate experience to appreciating the one who experiences, or the experience itself. Swimme is a cosmologist who's written many books to bring the discoveries of quantum physics and cosmology to our collective consciousness, really, so that we're acting out of our understanding of this universe as we know it now, not the universe of Copernicus or Ptolemy or Newton. He says, consciousness is as intrinsic to the universe as the gravitational dynamic. The universe is not dead. The discoveries of quantum physics undermine this fundamental delusion that has plagued Western thought for about the past 300 years. It is now self-evident that the entire universe has a psychic dimension. The light and matter of the primal fireball cannot be viewed as merely physical, since human consciousness comes out of them. Nothing has been added to the universe after the Big Bang, or the primal fireball, as Swimme calls it. So human consciousness is there. Consciousness itself is there in that moment, that first moment of unfolding. Physicists have recovered that we cannot nail down the nature of anything. The way in which we examine something determines what we discover about it. Human consciousness is not a picture of a fixed world out there, but comes from an interaction that elicits a particular response. Everything is a multivalent, mysterious treasure that is activated in different ways by different sensitivities. We think that the world we see is the world, but a hawk, whose sight is 8 times stronger than humans, lives in a world that, in terms of what it sees, is richer than ours. Radical humility is absolutely necessary and essential to our times. We are destroying our planet because we think we know what it is. We have lost sight of its infinite depths. In the conviction that we know what matter is, namely inert stuff to be fabricated into throwaway goods, we are destroying the earth. The truth is that the universe is a psychic event, blossoming in as many forms as there are sentient beings to interact with it. Sentience is not restricted to humans and animals. A leaf, a rock, or a mountain have consciousness without ego. Quite intrigued by this when I first read this. And later on, he gives the example of a rock and a photon coming from a light source and colliding with this rock. And we think that our seeing the rock comes from that same photon bouncing off the surface of the rock. And that's what we see when we look at the rock many times over. But in actual fact, the photon that hits that rock from the sun is absorbed by the rock, and it gives off another photon, a different one. So we're really the rock, in a sense, is disclosing itself to us with that electron coming from its insides. It has its own kind of interior reality, you could say, and it is impressionable. Sometimes neuroscientists talk about the origin of consciousness as being the hard problem, the difficult one. But if it's really only becomes so difficult if you think that matter is inert or dead. In Buddhist teaching, there is this teaching that if we're to be conscious of consciousness is aware of something. Things are things because of mind is mind because of things. They inter-are, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say. Now we move on to the last of these 4 nutriments, food and drink. The 4th kind of nutriment that the Buddha spoke about is food, breakfast, lunch and dinner. In fact, anything we consume by way of our mouth. What we eat is very important. Tell me what you eat and I will tell you who you are. Tell me where you eat and I will tell you who you are. The Buddha said that we should eat in such a way that keeps our compassion alive. UNICEF reports that every year 3 million children die from hunger and malnutrition. They are our own sons and daughters, and if we overeat, it is as though we are eating them. Our way of eating and producing food can be very violent. We are eating our children, we are eating our descendants, we're eating up the earth. It's a very extreme image. We're eating our children. In Brian Swimme, he talks about some of the statistics around child malnutrition and death. And he asks the question, why isn't this news? Why isn't it big news? Why aren't people clamoring to do something about it? Of course, there are people who do raise their voices. But in terms of the collective consciousness, it's not forefront in most people's minds. Mindfulness helps us to be aware of what is going on. The meat industry has devastated our planet. Forests are being destroyed to create grazing land for cattle or to grow crops to feed them. The world's cattle alone consume a quantity of food equivalent to the caloric needs of 8.7 billion people. It takes 100 times more water to produce a single pound of meat than it does to produce a pound of grain. Urgent action must be taken at the individual and collective levels. Not eating meat is a wonderful way to help our planet survive. Simply by eating vegetarian, you can preserve water, reduce pollution, prevent deforestation, and protect wildlife from extinction. If we stop consuming, they will stop producing. Sometimes people argue that it's okay to eat meat as long as you haven't killed it yourself and it hasn't been killed for you. But to eat meat or dairy is to create a market for it. And therefore to be part of the continuing of that violence. It's your awareness of suffering that naturally makes you determined to consume non-violently. It's not because someone forces you. You do it out of awareness, mindfulness, and compassion. It's a way of expressing love and gratitude to the earth. And you can have peace, joy, and happiness right away. Our daily life has to express our awakening. Only by consuming mindfully can we keep our compassion alive and ensure our planet can have a future. You can be very happy following a vegetarian diet, or a vegan diet for that matter. And you can do it without judgment. You stay tolerant. You don't want to impose your ideas on others. You allow them to be themselves. You should not talk too much about it, but simply invite others to enjoy delicious vegetarian dishes with you. There will always be people who continue to eat meat or drink a lot of alcohol. But we need 50% of humanity to volunteer to create balance. Eating is just one part of the practice, and as others see your peace, joy, and tolerance, then they will begin to appreciate a non-violent way of eating. If our society can practice mindfulness, we will be able to heal ourselves, heal our society, and also heal the planet. Elsewhere, he talks about all the energy and nutriments that go into making alcohol when there are people who are starving. And of course, there may be some places where maybe only grapes grow, no other things could grow. But to select to produce alcohol when there are people starving doesn't make sense. Of course, much alcohol is made from grain. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a verse reminding every monastic to train in their interactions with the world, to be as gentle and mindful as a bee visiting a flower. Bees feed on flowers' sweet nectar, but without destroying the flower's fragrance and beauty. We are all children of the earth, and we can make the most of the earth and benefit from its beauty, but in such a way that we respect the earth just as a bee respects a flower. It's a lovely image, this of the bee and the flower. And of course, the flower and the bee have a deep, deep symbiotic relationship in terms of giving life to each other, bees and other insects as well. Perhaps business people and politicians need to contemplate this, because we have destroyed the earth, we have destroyed the flowers, water, and the mountains with our greed. We should take only what we need and behave in such a way that the beauties and flowers of the planet remain intact. The teachings on the 4 nutriments help us to understand how not to destroy ourselves, our community, and our planet, and how to nourish and protect ourselves and our environment. It's a simple teaching, but a very useful, practical one to question when we are about to assimilate something into us, whether it's healthy and life-giving or not. Now, the narrative in our text shifts to one of Thich Nhat Hanh's disciples, Sister True Dedication. And she writes, "Courage and a radical honesty help us to see clearly the effect of our way of consuming on ourselves and on the planet. Is the pace of our growth economy sustainable? Am I the master of my attention? What is the true cost of a cheap t-shirt, a glass of liquor, or a pound of beef? The truth may sting, but it can wake us up. That insight will help us to transform our habits so we can find new ways to sustain our aspiration and find healthy fuel for our body and mind." When we do this, we experience greater sense of peacefulness, because we're more in alignment with the world, the planet and its beings. She continues, "We need the determination and strength of a warrior to cut through and claim our freedom, but we also need the patience and kindness of a meditator and the openness, tolerance and creativity of an artist. As Tay says," that's the term, affectionate term for Thich Nhat Hanh, "don't make yourself into a battlefield. The world doesn't need any more fanatics. If a habit is hard to shift, it's likely to have been transmitted to us through several generations or held in place by society, culture, and our context or environment. We can discover a lot about ourselves and our ancestors as we begin to make changes to align our choices with our values. Good advice here, don't make yourself into a battlefield. Roshi Kapleau used to say, don't give up meat, let meat give you up, which is very helpful. You can't entirely force it, but it's got to be something that comes out of one's inside. And then just to finish off now, this is a talk slightly shorter than usual, with the Order of Interbeings, one of their mindfulness trainings, which is focused on nourishment and healing. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I am committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. These mindfulness trainings are Thich Nhat Hanh's reworking of the precepts, often with a lot more detail in them, which has a positive side in helping us to understand how to put this into practice, though perhaps sometimes can be limiting as well. Some people may be drawn to it more than others. So by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming, I will practice looking deeply into how I consume the 4 kinds of nutriments, namely edible foods, sense impressions, volition, and consciousness. I am determined not to gamble or to use alcohol, drugs, or any other products that contain toxins, such as certain websites, electronic games, TV programs, films, magazine, books, and conversations. I will practice coming back to the present moment, to be in touch with the refreshing, healing, and nourishing elements in me and around me, not letting regrets and sorrow drag me back into the past, nor letting anxieties, fear, or craving pull me out of the present moment. I am determined not to try to cover up loneliness, anxiety, or other suffering by losing myself in consumption. I will contemplate into being and consume in a way that preserves peace, joy, and well-being in my body and consciousness, and in the collective body and consciousness of my family, my society, and my earth. So quite a challenging precept there for us to keep in mind. Now, because it is a little early, I'm happy to open things up and take any comments or questions people have, and maybe to get the ball rolling. If people want to report on what in this description of the 4 nutriments, was there one particular one that is particularly challenging for you? And if you've got ways you've worked with it to share with people, or other people may have suggestions. Anybody like to kick off? Priscilla.
So sometimes when I talk with friends, and like you were saying, you sense somebody is going down a path that is perhaps unhealthy, it's that tension between staying with them and also diverting can be a challenge.
I didn't get all of that, but maybe if I pass this down to you, pass it around.
You've got a better voice than me. Would you be able to?
So you were talking about diverting people up.
If you're with a friend who is suffering, and you can see that they're becoming absorbed in the past and anxieties, and it's that there's a tension because you have to stay with them, which means, like the rock, the photon, and then the photon bouncing off. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, so you're talking about when you're with somebody and you can see them going in a particular unhealthy direction, and how do you do that without it becoming kind of too forced? Yeah.
Or unwittingly reinforcing what they are thinking and doing, where they're going.
Reforming what they're thinking.
Reinforcing?
Reinforming, yeah.
Reinforcing?
Oh, reinforcing.
Strengthening.
Yeah, strengthening, yeah. Unwittingly strengthening what they are thinking. By trying to be supportive, you can sometimes unintentionally be reinforcing their delusions. Yeah?
Yeah, and also as I guess a kind of to protect both people. You know, you talk about the rock, the photon hits and then the rock emits a photon, and it has that same effect when you're truly with somebody who is in this suffering, in this, you almost have to go into the cave with them to bring them out. And,
Yes.
and that's kind of a danger for both. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes just being heard is the most healing thing, without adding anything extra.
Yeah.
But that you're right about going into the cave. The blue dragon's cave, they say in the Hikigan. Anybody have anything to suggest?
Yeah, sometimes it's a problem knowing which way to go. Like sometimes you want to be strong with somebody, and some people need to be you to say you be strong with them, but other people you just need to be quiet and but it's knowing which way to go with which one to use, which method to use with them.
Yeah.
And the awareness of what's going on is an important thing.
There's a teaching too about appropriate speech in Buddhism, whether it has to be the right time, the right situation. I think there's two others, people may remember that. But yeah, it's a whole lot of things has to be coming together.
Yeah.
Any other things on people's mind about the nutriments?
Yeah, I'm living with my sister and her family, and they're really getting into meat eating, because they've got kids. But I've talked to them about it a little bit, about the meat eating thing, about the planet, particularly about the planet, about climate change and beef, and it's like, kind of opening up the conversation. Do you really need it? Maybe you could get your nutrients elsewhere. And they're totally 100% aware, but there's no shift. And so I find myself just kind of going, I love them, but why can't they change? Just the climate change thing is what gets me, Even people that are really smart and aware and could eat different sorts of food, don't. You just have to sit with that uncomfortable feeling,
Well, there's a whole lot of things we could all be doing differently, and it's really frustrating seeing all these things being done that are not helping, not just the food. Yeah,
I find it really hard. Yeah, especially because I raise awareness. You raise awareness, but then people go, "Oh, yeah, cool, okay."
And we know that just the facts, being told the facts, doesn't make people change. There's got to be some kind of conversion or real change in the body-mind where. But yeah.
There's a really good novel, My Year of Meats, by Ruth Ozeki.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah. I think you're right though, it's about, you know, a whole lot of things coming together for that person.
Yeah. Anything else, people? Close to time's up, actually. No. So we'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.
The teaching you have received is offered freely. If you would like to make a donation to support the continuation of this podcast service or learn more about practice opportunities at the Auckland Zen Centre, please visit www.aucklandzen.org.nz.